Hi guys, in this video I'm going to be talking about how you can get hired as a self-taught software developer starting from scratch with no prior experience. So to set the context, the software industry has been growing tremendously for a long time now, and it's going to continue to grow. And this means that there's a lot of demand for software developers, and in general software developers' salaries are quite high. Also, this growth will continue, and the traditional educational space is simply not going to be able to keep up. There's not going to be enough people coming out of computer science education programs with a CS degree to fulfill the industry demand for new developers. And just to kind of highlight some of these points, I want to jump over to this page here, which is from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. And this is looking at this job of software developers. And there's two things I want to point out. One is that the median pay for 2020 was $110,000 per year. So this is saying that like roughly in the middle of the pack for software developers, you're probably going to be making about $110,000. And I would also say, this is for the US of course, but in general for Western markets and especially for the United States, if you are a software developer, you can probably be making six-figure salaries at an entry-level position, or especially after a few years of experience. And at this point, that's almost regardless of where you work. That's not only just for high-paying areas like Silicon Valley, which also are very expensive to live, but that can be for almost any place that you're living. And that's increasingly true with the rise of remote work that we're seeing now. And the other thing I want to point out here is that the job outlook for this current decade, for the next 10 years or so, is at 22%. And this is much faster than average. So this is what you want to see for the industry you work in. You want to see that the anticipated growth of that industry and the growth in the jobs of that industry is healthy and ideally faster than average. This means it's going to remain a very competitive place to work for the applicants. Like if you're working as a software developer, you're going to be more or less pretty content that even if you are working for a small startup and your company blows up and you lose your job, or even if you lose your job for some other reason, you will probably be able to find another job because there's just a lot of demand for software developers. So these are really healthy things to see for a software developer job, or any job for that matter. And this is just a lot of the reason why it makes sense to consider this as a new career, or as a start for your career if you're at that point in your life. All right, so let's just jump in and really answer this question. How can you get hired if you are starting from scratch right now and you want to learn how to code and then you want to start working in the software development space? So if you're starting from scratch, you need to have a very clear plan. The software industry is huge. There's a ton of different skills, technologies, and languages you could learn. So you can't just go around learning this, learning that, learning this language, learning another language. You need to have a very clear plan about how you're going to achieve this. And I would say you want to expect to have about 6 to 12 months of time invested in pursuing this goal. With those two things out of the way, I would say you want to start learning basic programming skills. You want to have a pretty good grasp of some programming language, whether that's TypeScript, whether that's Python, whether that's a more advanced language. You want to choose a single language and get pretty good in that language. You want to be able to write basic data structures, basic functions in that language from scratch without having to really look up that many things. And then from there, you want to find a specific job or industry area that you would like to focus on, something that you think is interesting, something that you enjoy working on, or something that you would like to work on. You want to try to move in that direction in terms of what you're learning and the projects that you're working on. And then throughout this whole process, you want to be building up a portfolio of projects. So ideally you want to have like 5 or 10, maybe even like 12 or more pretty serious portfolio projects built out that you can showcase to a future employer. And then finally, you want to start networking. At some point in this process, towards the end, you will have to actually apply to companies. You will have to do some kind of interview process. And that process is going to be much easier if you try to start networking early on and at least about halfway through this kind of timeline. You want to try to be networking and really just making connections with other people, establishing relationships with other people who work in the software space and can help you in your journey. that's going to give you a lot of valuable knowledge, and it's going to start building up connections that could become really valuable in the future when you want to change jobs in the future, or maybe that person's looking for a job and your company is hiring. In general, you want to start networking and establishing these connections in the industry because they're going to really help when you get to the point of actually trying to find a job. All right, so these are the three biggest takeaways I would have for someone trying to embark on this process. One, and this is probably the most important, you have to make consistent progress. You have to be coding every day or at least every few days. If you're not doing that, you're going to start to forget the things you've learned, and you're not going to make enough progress moving forward over time. Even if you only code for 30 minutes or an hour per day, you will be really surprised to see how much you learn and progress over a period of a few months, or let's say 6 months or more. So that's the key thing. You really have to keep working at this on a daily basis. And then second, you need to enjoy coding. You need to enjoy this process of trying to write a program, getting weird errors, getting things failing when you try to run the program, having to look up problems and issues and debugging things, and then having things go wrong that you just have no idea what's happened. You have to kind of enjoy this process. If you don't, then this isn't going to work for you as a career. I don't think you'll be able to do this for 5 years, 10 years into the future. And so that's an important piece of it. I do think anyone can learn to code, but it's probably not the right career for everyone. And so if at some point you're thinking like, this is just not fun, I don't enjoy this at all, then it's probably not the right thing for you. So that's definitely an important piece to keep in mind before you sink too much time, effort, and maybe even money into learning to code. And then finally, you want to tolerate failure. This is true with many things, but with learning to code, you're going to run into a lot of roadblocks. You're going to run into a lot of issues that you just can't solve, to be honest. And that's okay. That's totally okay. But you have to be able to get past those roadblocks, and you have to be able to overcome those hurdles. And so just be accepting of when you encounter issues that you can't solve, and try to develop strategies of dealing with that and then just moving past it and moving on. All right, so I wanted to share my experience because I went through this process a few years ago in 2016. I basically started to learn to code on my own, and I used various online resources. I didn't go to a coding bootcamp. I didn't go to a university to get a CS degree. I learned all of this on my own, and I don't think I paid for any resources that I used online. If I did, it was only a few things like a Udemy course here and there. But for the most part, I didn't really spend any money to learn. It really was being self-taught. And it took about 11 months to go from knowing nothing to actually getting hired in San Francisco. And I built up a pretty substantial portfolio of projects, which I want to share here. This is the portfolio, which is still sitting here. And as you can see, there's a ton of projects here that I built along the way. And these are all separate projects which are hosted on GitHub so people can look at the code. And then the applications are also live so people can go and try out the applications. And so you can see this is quite a lot of work, but this is the kind of thing you need to do if you want to be serious about actually getting hired in the end. So this is one of the projects. This is one of my favorite ones. This is Conway's Game of Life. And you can see there's this game that kind of just plays out of these automata on a game board. And this was a pretty cool project. This is one of my favorite projects. So you can see like you really need to have a lot of programming work under your belt before someone's going to hire you. And the best way to do that is to build out projects, because projects give you that real world experience and they give you something that you can showcase later on to prove that you gained that experience. So this was my path to get to the point where I could be hired. And I want to share that because it's definitely possible. It is definitely possible for you to learn to code on your own and then get to the point of actually being hired by an employer. And finally, I want to touch on how you could do this today. So I've been working on this new platform called Pairwise, which is me trying to present a solution to this problem of people learning to code and basically solve a few particular things. So this is Pairwise. You can find it here at app.pairwise.tech. And Pairwise has right now a single curriculum called Full Stack TypeScript. And the idea here is kind of twofold. One, to present a very curated, structured curriculum of topics so that you don't have to ask yourself, well, should I learn TypeScript, or should I learn Python, or what about Ruby? Ruby was pretty popular a few years ago, or how about some of these new languages like Rust? Like, should I learn that? You don't have to ask these questions, because the reality is, like, if you try to learn multiple languages, or you try to learn too many different skills and technologies, you're not really going to progress efficiently. Ideally, you want to learn a few key things and get to a pretty advanced stage of skill, and then try to get hired for those skills. So with the Pairwise curriculum, we've essentially curated a list of particular skills like that, so that you don't have to ask yourself, should I learn another language? Should I learn TypeScript? You can essentially just trust us that these are skills that are relatively easy to learn, in high demand, and that you could get hired for as a new developer. And so then you can focus on just working through the actual curriculum. All right, and the second main kind of point about Pairwise is that the learning process occurs through solving challenges. So if I scroll around this TypeScript module, you will see that there are a ton of challenges here. So let's just click on one. So here's one of the code challenges, and this is the Pairwise workspace where you will see these challenges. And the challenges have some instructions at the top, followed by a code editor that maybe has a lot of code in it, maybe it has no code. And then it has some tests at the bottom. And you have to do something to solve the challenge and then move on to the next challenge. And as you can see, there are hundreds of challenges like this. And ideally, you can solve any of the challenges in a few minutes, or maybe 5 to 10 minutes. They're not meant to be that hard, but they are meant to give you hands-on experience coding. And so this does two things. One, it gives you an easy way to make a little bit of progress every single day coding. You could say, let me just solve one challenge per day. Let me just solve 3 challenges per day, something like that. And that would be very doable. That would be really like fairly easy to do. But over time, once you've solved 50 challenges or 100 challenges, you would start to actually have a good amount of skill in actually programming. And so these challenges have the actual challenge here, and then they have also, many of them have a video explanation as well. So let's find one of those. How about this one? So again, we have the challenge workspace here, and then we can scroll down and we also have a video explanation. So most of the coding challenges have a video explanation with them, and that's meant to do two things. One, if you get totally stuck, you can use the video as a guide. And then two, if you solve the challenge easily or not, the video can provide some additional context or information related to that particular topic. So our view with Pairwise is that this kind of combination of, let's say, a video tutorial, some text content, and then also this hands-on environment is really the key sort of ingredients to learn to code efficiently. And then you put that together in a list of hundreds of challenges like this, and this is going to be a really effective way to learn to code. Now, all of these modules, at the end of the module, also have a section on some projects. They have 3 or 4 projects that you can build to start to build up a portfolio of projects like I showed you here. So that's what Pairwise is. And again, you can find it here at app.pairwise.tech. And I've been working on this to try to solve this problem of how can you learn to code in a way that is affordable, accessible, and relatively efficient. Like, you don't want to spend that much time deciding which resources to use, which languages and skills to learn, and like all of these other questions. You want to spend most of your time actually writing code and learning to code, and that's what Pairwise is meant to be. Now, of course, the entire course is not free. The rest of these modules here in the more advanced sections for this course are modules that you would have to buy the course to access. And as you can see here, they're locked if we look at them. But right now, the entire course costs about $50. So again, it is extremely affordable, especially compared to other options like a computer science degree or a coding bootcamp. But for now, also, the first 3 modules are completely free to use, and there's 150 or maybe 200 challenges in there. And I think that's probably enough for someone to get a feeling for if they actually enjoy programming or not, and if they should proceed and work on these other challenges. All right, so that is going to wrap it up with this video. I hope you learned something from this. And if you're considering learning to code, and especially if you're considering going through the self-paced journey, I would encourage you to check out Pairwise, try some of the challenges here, and see if this solution works for you and can be an effective way to learn to code. All right, with that said, if you liked this video, please like it. And if you want to see more content like this, including videos where I solve some of the challenges here, please subscribe to this channel, and I will see you in the next video.